Thank you, Mr. Chair. Um, Wish we had an item before us to vote on today because I can't wait. But did want to share a couple of comments and observations from today's hearing, just to reiterate some of what's been said before, associate myself with Senator Kane's comments on the moral imperative here, the value statement. Also to recognize, as you've articulated, Mr. Chairman, we're discussing and debating a minimum wage, which in far too many locations in the country is not a living wage or livable wage. We've touched on the dynamic between the CEO or other executive compensation, which is not only multiple, but multiple times, sometimes exponential times, the wages or salaries earned by entry-level workers in so many industries. That, by the way, was an issue and I think a problem even prior to COVID. So to shed well, we can't do this, is going to be hard because of COVID, I think is in many cases a false argument because these dynamics we were struggling with prior to the pandemic, they've been exacerbated by the pandemic, if anything. Recognition that in the restaurant industry and others as well, it's not exclusive to the restaurant industry, there's so many high school and college students that make up a chunk of the workforce. It's one thing for a young person to want to get that first job, second job, for the sake of experience, building the resume, upward mobility. It's a whole different ballgame if you have to work 10, 20, 30 hours a week or more because you're trying to put your way through college, right? College affordability, Mr. Chairman, I know you know, is a whole another conversation that we need to be having urgently. And given the ratios of employees made up of high school and college students in so many industries, it is clearly not separate and apart from the issue before us. I also want to point out that the stress and the anxiety of so many parents struggling to make ends meet, let alone that of not being able to provide for your children and your family in the way that parents would like to, starting with meeting the basic needs. Again, a dynamic that existed prior to the pandemic, only been exacerbated by the pandemic. And I don't think it's lost on any of us the cruel irony of the metrics that we sometimes refer to when it comes to the state of the economy. Both prior to the pandemic and especially since the pandemic, some people are pointing to the Dow Jones, record Dow Jones. But at the same time, we see lines and lines at food pantries across America. So let's be mindful when we look at economic indicators and whether the economy is doing well or not. Even in good times prior to the pandemic, based on the Dow Jones, you had far too many people, both unemployed and underemployed, again, exacerbated by the pandemic. We've talked about those earning less and their dependency on social services. I want to call special attention to poverty, even when you're working, as trauma, detrimental not just to physical, but to mental health. The stress, anxiety, depression, desperation that comes from not being able to make ends meet easily, even when you're working full time. Again, something that existed prior to the pandemic, only exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. So, do have two questions I want to pose for discussion to both Mr. Wise and Ms. Murray. I have about a minute left. Folks have talked about what a difference a $15 minimum wage would mean to them. So the quick question, or the quick answer question is, what would you do with that wage increase? Would you invest in stocks? Or would you spend it? One of the big conversations today is, what does it mean for small business? What it means for small business, I would imagine small businesses would be helped by folks having more spending money in working class communities. And the other is, if there's just any additional experiences to share of what you've had to do, what you've had to sacrifice to make ends meet, or what you've maybe been on the verge of that you never would have contemplated before in your life, because I know my family has, when I was growing up, either through additional recycling,
I'm afraid that
selling
if you
goods.
want them to answer the question, they have virtually no time at all. So let me
Right.
turn it over to them. Mr. Wise, Ms. Murray, very
Well,
briefly.
even though me and Miss Murray, we work for the two biggest corporations on the face of the planet, McDonald's and Walmart, it's not lost on me, the small mom and pop businesses, especially in my community. On my way to work, when I pass Rosie's Flower Shop, Sam's Shoe Store, not Costco, not Amazon, not Walmart, but just the shops in my community that I can't, even on Valentine's Day that just passed, stop at the local flower shop and buy flowers for my wife. I can't stop and buy new shoes for my kids locally in the community because low-wage workers like me just don't have the funds to pour into our community. And if we had $15 an hour, that's a 365-day-a-year stimulus package. 15 is COVID relief. I would be able to buy my wife flowers. If in Greenville, South Carolina, I'd be able to take my family out to Carl's restaurant. We simply don't have the funds to even do that. Have fun night with the family, buy new shoes, buy flowers. You give low-wage workers money, we're not going to buy beachfront property, invest in stock. We're going to pour it into the economy, help grow it, and help grow jobs as well. Cynthia?
Okay, thank you very much. Senator Lujan.
Thank you so very much, Senator Sanders.